So here we are again with Meditation Amsterdam, and in today's video I thought I would expand a little bit on my current understanding of the idea of reincarnation, which is one of these Buddhist ideas that people can be very skeptical about, but it can also be misunderstood in quite a terrible way. And I think that it is also one of those ideas that tend to make Buddhism be considered some kind of religion or some kind of esoteric discipline, when in fact it is not. And it makes people see Buddhism as something that you believe in. In other words, they will be talking about, do you believe in reincarnation, and so on. And so I have a number of thoughts about it, and I have been studying a little bit on the subject, and I thought I would share how I understand it right now, and maybe just help clarify the topic for anyone who's interested. So if you look at the Buddhist view of the world, or the view of reality from a Buddhist perspective, the first thing to understand is that these guys are these guys, as if it was a group of people. So there's an understanding in Buddhism that reality is not what we commonly think it is in normal waking life. So as we go about our daily life, most of what's happening is we are exposed to experience. I was talking in my previous video about experience and what experience means in the root of the word. Experience means to stand out. So what we are constantly doing is we are perceiving things that stand out in our awareness, and they pull us. And those things can be sometimes internal, such as thoughts and feelings, but a lot of the time they are also external. So, I have here, for example, a cup of coffee, and it is an experience because it stands out as something that is physical. I can touch it. It has a texture. It has a certain temperature to it. And as I take a sip, which I will, then I can experience its flavor. So everything in that experience is telling me, it's shouting and claiming its reality. It's saying I am physically real. And for a Buddhist is important to, for people who wrote the Vedic texts and the Buddhist texts, it's important to understand that these guys had taken their meditation and their yogic practices so far, they were so advanced in the development of their mind, that their perception of reality, their perception of the world was not our common perception of the world. Now, I can claim that because I have started to have my perception enhanced, and I can vouch for the fact that the world is not what we think it is. Yeah, what is really happening is that mind is generating a live map of reality around you, and you are confusing that for reality, but really what is out there is this kind of field of potentiality, or whatever you want to call it, and then mind generates world. Now you could still parcel that out and say okay, mind generates your perception of the world. But the Buddhists who have gone very far, and the meditators who have gone very far, have come to realize that mind creates world, in the more literal sense. And so from that perspective, they are not coming from the perspective of there is a physical world that is pre-existing. We are born, we have a brain, and that brain helps us perceive that physical world. They're coming from the perspective of there is mind is primary, and mind generates the world. which is a complete reversal of how we see reality. I would say in the West, but really it's in the modern world, or human beings, because of the way we perceive the reality out there as something that precedes us, as something that we and as something that we perceive. So that is the first point to understand, is that to these guys, reality is not a physical reality in which brains are just out there to perceive stuff. To them, reality is mental, and mind generates the illusion of matter, which to them really is just a show. It's all a big illusion, even if you can touch it. So that's the first thing to understand, because in a world that is physical, the idea of a spirit or a soul or an essence, an ethereal essence that can reincarnate across lifetimes is insane, right? Like you just don't get away with that. It doesn't fit the model. So let's make that let's make that perfectly clear. So if you are a staunch materialist who is interested in Buddhism as a means to, let's say, just acquire a little bit of more peace of mind and relaxation and be a little bit more happy, all power to you. But of course you would not subscribe, so to speak, to the doctrine of reincarnation or the idea of reincarnation, because it doesn't fit your model of the world. That's very simple. There is another point to make about this, though, which is, at least that's the way that I explain this to myself, and that is that the idea of reincarnation and the idea of mind being primary and matter only being secondary is not something that these people made up. Okay, they didn't invent this in the way that somebody sat down and invented, I don't know, a novel was written, right? They were not into creating fiction. What they were into was into exploring the deepest, most profound recesses and experience of mind, and developing mind to a level that allowed you to perceive reality as it truly is, to perceive it correctly. So I take issue with people who, let's say, believe that the Buddhists made up the idea of reincarnation. Oh yeah, Buddhists believe that is... No, it's not. For these people, this was not a belief. This was an experiential reality. And who's to say, and we'll get into this, that they had a claim to knowledge because they had actually enough presence of mind to notice their self transitioning from one lifetime to the next, right? So that's the claim. Actually, it's a claim of knowledge. It's not a claim of belief, and Buddhism as such does not demand that you hold beliefs about, this person or that event or whatever. They do invite you to practice with a certain degree of commitment and devotion and faith, but only to the degree that these are mental states that then facilitate certain transitions and certain realizations to take place. So they're not much about believing in stuff. It's just not their... It's not a religion in that sense. It's not formal religion which demands you to make statements of belief that are unfounded just because you heard them from someone. They are about discovering experientially what is correct through very high levels of development of mind. So that's those 2 points that I wanted to make. The first one is, they see mind as primary, matter as secondary. That already sets the tone for whether something like reincarnation is possible. Secondly, they're not making things up, in the sense of they are not creating an esoteric or religious narrative. They are relating their understanding of reality once mind becomes advanced enough to see things correctly. Okay, so those are two very important points. So then what do we have? We have the idea of reincarnation, and then that would be probably a third point that is very important to understand, is that they are not claiming at any point that your person gets reincarnated. In other words, the person that makes Pablo, with his background, his memories, his body, his experiences, and all these kind of things, is bound by time and limited to the extent of the life of my body, right? So all those things that I described are temporary, and when the body dies, then those things die with it. They are not really substantial, right? They pop up with the person and they die with the person. So then what is it that remains, you would ask? And what is this mysterious spirit that just carries on? And that's when you get into this idea that we've also been discussing about your self-realization and realizing your true self, which is this idea that you have this vehicle, this shell that you call that you call me, which is made up of mind and body, but neither of those are your true essence. Your true essence is that which knows that you have a mind and a body. Is that knowing. It's not a thing. It is not a person. You can hardly even put words to describe it, but maybe the best or the most neutral thing that you can say about it without making an incorrect statement is that it is being, consciousness, bliss. It is knowingness itself, right? It's beingness and knowingness itself without any attributes whatsoever. And so that's when you realize that you're that, you have realized yourself, your true self. And that kernel of knowingness that sparks life into your body and that knows your body and that knows your mind and that knows that it is what it is part of the bigger consciousness. So it's not personal anymore. That knowingness does not belong to you. It's not something that you can attribute to your person or to your individuality anymore. It is universal consciousness. And that universal consciousness never dies. It was not born with the body, and it would not die with the body. It is just essential knowingness of being. And so that is what is preserved, as a matter of fact. That is what carries on. That said, then the next question is, what do we mean carries on? And that's where the whole reincarnation part comes in. So what seems to be happening is that knowing quality entangles itself with reality, and it kind of creates patterns of action, patterns of memory, and patterns of self-confusion in things that are not that essence, right? So it confuses itself with a bunch of things, and it starts to desire things and experiences and whatever. And these are like, think of it as a package of patterns and information and memory, right? It's this intangible package of information and memory. And what it does is every chance it gets, it grabs onto a body and it kind of embodies itself. So it's kind of like it grabs this avatar through which it can express its pattern. And so that avatar would be us, right? Like it has become, we are consciousness becoming embodied because of all patterns that it's carrying with it and that need to be somehow expressed out. And so out we pop into existence, and without realizing that our essence is consciousness, we are acting like the pattern. I made a video a few days ago about this whole idea of a whirlpool, which is a pattern, right? And so we are kind of a whirlpool. We are kind of a pattern that is just expressing itself, but in reality, we are the water. So and so so these packages of memory and patterns, they embody themselves, and when that body dies, it fizzles out. The pattern continues, and it re-embodies yet again to play itself out. It keeps embodying to play itself out over and over again. That is what the Buddhists would call the cycle of samsara, so the cycle of suffering. It is that unless you have transcended the patterns that wanted to express, unless you have seen through it and become self-realized and aware of your true nature and start to perceive your essence, you are a kernel of consciousness that keeps embodying in order to play out those patterns of self-perception that want to play out. So it's almost like it's like a piece of software that finds hardware and starts showing things on the screen, right? Like you can think of it that way, right? So that software is it just keeps expressing itself by embodying itself or incarnating itself, and it does so over and over again over time. So that is what explains then reincarnation. And so you can see a microcosm of that even in your own life, right? So it is this idea that sometimes you are very clear-minded and you almost like become self-realized as that sort of knowing presence, but then immediately something in your brain or something in the world calls your attention, and then you become engaged with the world, and in a sense you embody yet again, right? So it happens in very short cycles during your life, and it happens in longer cycles across lifetimes. Another analogy to understand is to compare it to dreaming or to sleeping. So sleeping would be small cycles of going back to the source and then popping out again, going back to the source where nothing exists and then popping out again. So dreamless sleep is you're back in the source. You have no body in dreamless sleep. Not as far as your experience is concerned, but then the body appears again as you wake up, and so you can compare those. Those are similar cycles. Sleep and death are cycles that are just varying in length and intensity and depth, right? Whereas we see our lifetime as a single one-off event that will never happen again, the Buddhist thinks more in terms of recurring patterns that happen over and over again. And so if we go back to the analogy of the software, of you being really this package of software and patterns and memory that incarnates or embodies itself every chance it gets, then the very next question is how to stop that. And that is the big goal of Buddhism, is to stop the endless cycle of samsaric reincarnation. And in order to do so, the only way to go about it is to improve the software that wants to find expression, right? It is to improve that package of patterns and memories and how you perceive, what you perceive yourself to be. If that pattern perceives itself to be a human being with desires, it will inevitably find a human body into which to express and play that self-perception out. And but if within or across several of these lifetimes, that pattern of information starts to suspect, like, maybe I'm not a human being, right? There seems to be something that I'm not quite getting here. It feels like I'm caught in repetitiveness, and a certain something starts to dawn in that consciousness, and it across lifetimes. Apparently it takes several thousands of human lifetimes to start to realize that, but even before that, you have millions and billions of lifetimes since the moment something was an amoeba up until a human being. And so consciousness keeps growing across time like that. And the human vehicle is a very precious vehicle because it's the only one that we know of in the animal or whatever in reality that has enough mental juice to make the step towards self-realization. And that step is crucial. So the Buddhist doctrine, or the Buddhist discipline, is to work very hard on realizing yourself, so that you disentangle that repetitive package that wants to keep embodying over and over again. And once you become truly self-realized, then the cycle of samsara is interrupted, because that package now understands what it really is, which is the substance between its patterns, right? So just like a very intelligent whirlpool will realize that it's not a whirlpool, but it's really water, that the package of memory realizes, wait a second, I'm not a human, I am consciousness first and foremost, being expressed as a human, and therefore your desires and your patterns start to kind of melt away, and they don't feel, there's not a compulsive need for them to be expressed over and over again, both within your lifetime, but also across lifetimes, if we subscribe to this idea of the conscious essence carrying on. And so then that brings also another interesting element, which is that in order for you to cut out of that cycle, the Buddhist practices enhance your consciousness and your chances for self-realization. That self-realization starts to express itself first during waking life, which is the lowest bar that you can set around this, right? So during waking life, you start to become much more aware of your surroundings, and much more attuned to what's happening at any given point. That increase in self-awareness starts to cascade into modes of mind that are deeper, such as dream sleep, and then even dreamless sleep, right? So what starts to happen is your dreams start to become far more lucid. And that is because despite your mind is getting used to lower levels of activity, but retaining high levels of awareness. So your dreams start to become lucid. Then even when there's no dream happening, in other words, there's no experience taking place, you in dreamless sleep then start to manage to keep that awareness also on a high level, and that is a very advanced practice, right? So it is in the Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep, to have the full light of awareness shining brightly, a bright knowingness of your existence in dreamless sleep is a very high level of attainment, right? So now it's one thing to be very aware when you're awake, it's another bar altogether to be very aware when you are dreaming, right? To have lucid dreams. And it's yet another higher bar to be very aware when you are in the dreamless sleep state. And the claim of the Tibetan dream yogas is that when you achieve the ability to be fully aware and awake during dreamless sleep, then you have you have given yourself a real shot at retaining conscious awareness in what they call the bardo, which is the state that you encounter after death, in which weird modes of mind and things will pull that awareness in all kinds of directions. And if that awareness is not strong enough and it's still identified with its human patterns and self-perception and identity, first chance it gets is going to embody itself in the very same way. Whereas if your level of awareness during dreamless sleep has become so high, that level of awareness gets carried into the death state, and it is therefore used in order to choose whether you want to reincarnate and embody again, or whether you want to stay as this sort of mind at large open awareness that no longer expresses itself as a body. So now what I know it's my own explanation, therefore I love it, but it helps me understand the topic, and it helps me understand it in a way that, at least to my mind, feels like it doesn't require any supernatural beliefs, but it does require a couple of jumps outside of Aristotelian logic or Newtonian physics, if you will, which is what I mentioned at the start, which is that you must experience the world as mind and not matter, and subscribe to the idea that mind is primary for this to be allowed, let's say, for reincarnation to be even possible. And what helps in that regard is if you have been practicing meditation or engaging in Buddhist practices, then your mind becomes primed to this. And then when you start to perceive yourself as pure awareness or pure conscious awareness, or so being consciousness bliss, then that jump starts to get a lot easier. So it's not like this massive leap of faith of saying, well, you know what, all I have ever understood and perceived around me is the world as matter, and now you're telling me that you know everything is mind, and I have no bridge in between. The bridge in between is having the experience of being mind through meditation or spiritual coaching or any of these kind of practices that could get you there. So that's the that's on the topic of reincarnation. That's my current understanding of it, which I'm sure over time will get more refined, or maybe even discarded. Right? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe this whole thing is that doesn't make any sense a few years down the line, or is not even interesting. But it's also interesting for me as an explanation, because from what I've seen in the Buddhist or meditative path that is described, they talk about yogic powers of reincarnation, levitation, teleportation, all manner of strange things at this end. At this end is just like, oh, try to quiet the mind a little bit. And there's a massive path in between. And even 2 years ago, some of the initial parts of that path beyond the basics, where you start to feel your energy body, experience chakras and things of that kind, were to me complete nonsense. I have passed that threshold now, and I realize none of it was nonsense. It is experientially correct, even though it cannot fit within the mold of modern science, if you will. And then the question that I ask myself is, why would that be correct and the very next thing be complete bonkers, right? Or the one after that. So that's not to say that I subscribe to these ideas and believe them, no questions asked. I just, all I'm saying is that I have now the ability to entertain those ideas as potentially correct. And having realized that the esoteric or funky parts that I thought were nonsense, as you start to experience those, then you say, well, where do you draw that line of reality? Why would they start making things up beyond a certain point, but not before that, right? So anyway, those were my thoughts. That's the thoughts about reincarnation, and a bit of an explanation of how Buddhists see it. Some of the tantric or dream practices that go into that, and how they perceive things more as cycles as opposed to one-off events, the way we sometimes tend to think about it. I hope that helps, and I'll be making some more videos soon. Cheers.